Okay, so hello again. I am in the Bushel Collective Space that's located on Main Street in Delhi, New York, which is the county seat of Delaware County, New York. We are situated on the territories of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, which is more commonly known by the French name, the Iroquois Nation. And I am very, very grateful to our speakers today who are here to tell us their stories and share their perspectives on mental health, care, support, and recovery. So before we begin, I just have a couple of things that I wanted to, just housekeeping things I wanted to go over. I see most of you are muted. If you could please stay muted during the presentations, that really helps the audio quality. And video is fine if you want to stay on video. If the quality gets a little wonky, I might step in and ask folks to turn off their video because sometimes that affects the quality of the recording and of the broadcast. We won't be taking questions during the presentations, but please feel free to put your comments and your questions in the chat. We'll return to them later on in the program. I wanted to just give you a quick overview of what the program will entail, and then we'll move kind of right into it. This panel is organized in conjunction with our current exhibition. You can see some of it behind me here, and during some of the remarks, I'll be walking through the gallery so you can see all of the paintings that are mounted right now. So again, this is in conjunction with the show Jessica Farrell, The Wilderness Diary. And we are tonight going to be hearing and hopefully interacting with our speakers to understand the mental health crisis, especially in rural communities. To hear also how places like NAMI, and we have Bill Hayes, who is the president of the local chapter of NAMI here, to tell us how organizations like his are supporting folks and families who are suffering from mental illness. And how we as residents and citizens can also help in the care, support, and recovery process. First, I want to really thank Jessica Farrell for this beautiful, beautiful show and for putting together our panelists for tonight's event. While I do the gallery walkthrough, what I recommend is that you view with the speaker view. That way you'll be able to see the show very clearly. It'll be the main window in this Zoom mosaic that we have here. So let me just very quickly introduce our speakers and ask them to unmute themselves and just say hello. That way they'll shoot up to the top of the Zoom window here. So first we have Sydney Center artist and mental health advocate Jessica Farrell. If you just say hello.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Ariana Ilowit, who is a peer specialist in training in Oneonta. If you would say just a quick hello.
Hi. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ariana. Jason Peyton, who's in Schoharie County as a peer engagement specialist.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here.
Thanks, Jason. And Garrett Smith, who is in Syracuse as a statewide organizer for the Center for Community Alternatives. Why don't you say hello?
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here.
Thank you, everyone. So now let me turn this over to Jessica Farrell. And again, if you throw the view on speaker mode, I'm gonna begin with the gallery walkthrough. Jessica?
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I thank you, Mina and Bushel Collective, for this opportunity to talk about art, mental health, and recovery. I think during this time, having a pandemic in our midst, it's good to talk about mental health. And I just hope you are all managing with your health. The Wilderness Diary consists of 9 portraits, a companion book that tells the story of each person I painted, and an audio diary. And I hope you'll stop by this weekend. The show is up for one more weekend, and come by and say hello. That's Saturday and Sunday till from 11 to 1 p.m. I live in Delaware County, New York. It's a very bucolic county, and Delaware County is very large. It's a rural county in the Western Catskill Mountains. The weather is changeable and the winters are long. We have some of the best skies. They're dramatic and ominous. I tried to capture them in my paintings. The rugged, enigmatic landscape of my home became the backdrop for the work. The project is centered around stories of mental health, struggle, and recovery. Stories that I felt that were important, but ones that you don't hear often. Several factors came together. First, I have a family connection to mental illness. And in an effort to understand myself and my family, I joined my local NAMI chapter 7 years ago. The National Alliance on Mental Illness is a grassroots organization dedicated to building better lives for Americans affected by mental illness. We have a wonderful local chapter, which you'll hear a little bit about later. I also worked with NAMI in 2015 and 16, and I helped facilitate several mental health awareness events. I was always captivated by the people who shared powerful stories of recovery. One of those stories belonged to my Aunt Barbara. Several years ago, she sent me the diary she kept as a young woman in the 1960s and 70s during her struggle with bipolar disorder. She hoped her journey could help others. Barbara was the cool aunt, an animal lover that let my sisters and me stay up late listening to Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass Band. She kept a canister filled with candy, atomic fireballs, bazooka bubble gum, and yards of licorice rope. She was spontaneous and funny and lit up the room with her energy. She loved dogs. My aunt would greet us flanked by a few big bouncy dogs and plenty of sugar. It made staying at her house in Boonville, Indiana, a kid's dream come true. When Barbara sent the diary, she also sent photographs of herself as a young girl, a beguiling blonde, often she'd be cradling an animal. The images did not reveal the unrest that would hold her captive on and off for years. Her writings exposed an alternate narrative, and this was the jumping off point for my work. I've always loved children's books, fables about animals especially. And I like the books. I think children's books have wisdom and the illustrations. And somehow I imagine my aunt's journey in this way. Initially, it was hard to read her writings. I'd scan a few pages and put it down for about a week. They seemed to be frantic letters from the edge of a tormented dream world. It took me almost a year before I was able to look at the work objectively. The papers themselves were a mix of handwritten notes and typed letters. Some were labeled a concise history of my truth or consequences. Some of the writings were nonsensical, written in rhyme or backwards. Others were heartfelt passages of a young woman desperately trying to maintain her sanity. In talking with my aunt and reading the writings, it was clear that the 14 shock treatments she'd received at 21 years old were the center of her story. She never really was able to process what had happened to her in 1966. Also, I learned from her writings that the scars on her arms were self-inflicted wounds from years ago. They were an outward reminder of her journey. A selection of her journal entries are there in the gallery, and if you stop by, you can read them and take a look at the photos of her with dogs and animals. Now I'm just going to read one of the entries from January 1968. Now, if I can only remain together enough to get it down like it is, when I feel the torment steadily ripping me apart, it becomes more and more difficult to keep up the facade. Some voracious creature is gnawing at my insides, and the fear wells up inside like 100 scorpions crawling towards me as I lie helplessly chained. The hardest part of all lies in attempting to maintain a normality to others, because I know I can no longer be what they want me to be. They do not want me to be weak, because in my weakness, they see their own weakness and it frightens them. So I steady my unseaworthy vessel and make like everything is roses without the thorns. I must not disappoint anyone. I've got to live up to their wishes. I can't stand to see the pain on their faces. I know the storm will pass, but their faces reflect fear and worry. I must hold on. The battle grows weary. No way in and no way out, just riding out the storm. The storm doesn't come from any outside elements. That's what makes it difficult to battle. The enemy is inside my body, trying to devour me. So beyond my aunt working in the community, I realized that there were many more stories that needed to be heard. And it was important to shed light on quiet, powerful stories of recovery that I'd actually heard in NAMI. It's a peer program called In Our Own Voice. I didn't want to paint the horror of mental illness. I reached out to my colleagues and friends that I'd worked with in the community, and thankfully they were all willing and generously shared a very vulnerable chapter in their life. Despite living with a mental health condition, many of my friends advocate for people struggling today. Quite a few work as peer recovery specialists, meaning they use their own lived experience to support others. Why did I paint young people? Because many mental illnesses start to present in adolescence. Our physical transformation is paralleled by subtle changes in our biological landscape. In reading Barbara's writings and listening to my friends, I tried to imagine what it would be like navigating the awkwardness of adolescence, and then also maybe hearing voices, experiencing mood shifts, or feeling suicidal. I painted the skies to mirror the emotional and physical isolation my friends described. Adolescence is a time of vulnerability, but it's also a time of possibility. It's crucial to address the needs of young people when talking about mental illness, because it's an opportunity to change the course of their struggle. I hope my work communicates that important message. Why did I paint animals? Well, I come from a family that loves animals. Ironically, the names on my mother's side are Fox and Crane. Of course, Barbara had a strong bond with animals. In the 1990s, Barbara left her job in manufacturing and bought a house and a few acres at the edge of town and opened Trademark Kennel, a successful dog kennel. Her passion and love of animals, especially dogs, helped in her recovery. When I thought of painting all these young people, I felt that it was necessary that they were not alone. And so I felt that the animal companion was a protector of sorts. The Wilderness Diary is also a reflection on our mental health crisis. 1 in 5 adults is living with a mental health condition. Misconceptions and stigmas make it challenging to address. Lack of funding for mental health care services has had a profound effect on communities. Rural America has been especially hit hard. People must travel long distances to receive services. There are chronic shortages of mental health professionals, certainly here in Delaware County. And it can take a month or more to get an appointment, which if a person is in crisis, that's a real issue. Psychiatric wards are closing. There's also shame and stigma in small communities that can be a barrier. And of great concern to me and my colleagues, a mental health crisis call is often handled by a police officer, which can lead to tragic consequences. Sadly, Delaware County has one of the highest suicide rates in New York State. 80% of the inmates in our county jail have some form of mental illness. We live in a society that locks up people with a medical condition because we have no better alternative. In 2017, myself and some advocates formed the Mental Health Justice Project. We were greatly concerned about people living with mental illnesses who come into contact with the criminal justice system. In jails and prisons, people do not receive the treatment they need and end up getting worse, not better. So my paintings and the book are really about hope, but they're also about the inhumanity of a broken healthcare system. And the tragedies also that are happening because of that. Many mental illnesses have a genetic biological base. So putting people in jail, we can't expect recovery that way. Ultimately, the Wilderness Diary is about triumph over adversity. I wanted to spread a message of hope. My aunt and my friends all persevered. I guess I also wanted to sound an alarm because I feel our society can do better for people with these struggles. Mental illness is a facet of the human condition. Creativity itself is an irrational voyage. I hope my work helps others understand that they're not alone. There is hope. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce my friends who I painted, and I'm very grateful to them for sharing, a part of their life that is difficult, I realize. So that's Jason, Peyton, Garrett Smith, and Ariana Lewitt. And I will start with Jason here. So thank you. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Jessica. Can you hear me okay? You can hear me okay?
Maybe a little louder, Jason.
A little louder. Let me just hold on one second as I adjust this real quick. There's a little bit of a white noise behind me, but hopefully that's a little better. I often wonder, I'm just going to read through this quick because I've got a lot and I've got 5 minutes. So I often wonder if a traumatic childhood phobia could have caused my schizoaffective disorder as an adult. I wonder this because my issues seem to start when I began in school, kindergarten, at 4 years old. I was a really sensitive kid, the only one crying on my first day of school. And my family was very loving, but being in class around these kids was so difficult for me. And being at home felt safe, but being at school felt very scary. I remained alone in classes, recess, and lunch for years. Then in 4th grade, my teacher recognized I wasn't socially developed and held me back for a year. And it did help, but I did still feel dread every morning before the bus came, so I stayed home sick a lot. I was feeling a school phobia. I didn't realize it back then, but that's what it was. And looking back, it grew through the years until I asked my parents tearfully when I was in 11th grade to go to a counselor for my first time. And my parents acted quick. They realized there was a big problem. And the counselor taught me to communicate my feelings for the first time. Previous to that, I was hardly talking to anybody. And he helped me graduate in my junior year. I got out of school early, and I got a job, and I worked for 3.5 years while going to school part-time. I got on an antidepressant, but I had my first manic episode because of that. And it wouldn't be the first time that a drug exacerbated my symptoms. One time, I actually smoked pot at a party for the first time, and it actually caused me to hallucinate, which is not a normal thing. I later read that there can be a correlation between pot usage in young people and triggering schizophrenia if the person is genetically predisposed. And I was. Different drugs work differently for different people. That's why some meds work and some do not for different people with the same diagnosis. Medical marijuana actually has become a useful tool for some people these days with mental health issues, but for me it was not a good thing. And I did finally manage to finish my associate's degree 6 years later, struggling with the mental illness. And I feel that mental illness actually gave me a heightened sense of creativity, and college enhanced my artistic ability, but I began developing entertainment attractions for performing arts, but my illness at the same time was growing worse and worse. My moods were now going up and down, my thoughts were not clear, and my memory was really bad, and I had hallucinations at times, and my social anxiety was getting terrible. I was grasping for my sanity. And then at 25, my uncle took his life. He'd been struggling with alcoholism and possibly dealing with very similar things that I was symptomatic with, and this devastated our family. And I'd been going to a counselor, but he really freaked out when I started talking about my psychosis symptoms, and he fired me. And I desperately looked for a psychiatrist, and a child psychiatrist came to my rescue at around 25 and diagnosed me with bipolar. She put me on an antipsychotic medication, which made me suicidally depressed. I decided I was going to end my life. I was just going to do it. And I began writing my goodbye letter when my parents, thank God, intervened, and I went to the hospital and was admitted and diagnosed as schizoaffective. My medication was adjusted and I started my recovery. And one day I discovered when I was online in an article, it said that fish oil helps people with schizophrenia and bipolar. And I had both with schizoaffective disorder, so I tried it and it helped. And I realized the value of researching answers online. Now, this was before Google. Today, everybody's Googling. Back then, nobody did. A lot of people were very uncomfortable with the internet. And I learned a lot about a lot of supplemental therapies, though. And the internet really kind of saved me. It was risky. I tried a lot, and a lot of them didn't work, but some did. And it really boosted my recovery. And over 10 years went by, and I had been on disability, but I was ready finally to start working. So online I found NAMI with Paul Klein and in her own voice program that helps you present your recovery story. And I knew if I could get over my fear, I thought I'd enjoy presenting. And after speaking for a year, I was right. I loved public speaking. And I became a NAMI board member as well at an affiliate. At a convention, I ran into Rena Reba, who introduced me to Pam Levy, who helps people with mental illness find work. She helped me get a 6-month speaking job at Catskill Center for Independence. And after I was hired from there, I went to RSS and became Schohary's first peer advocate. Now, I also got married in 2015, but my spouse developed cancer and died a year later, and it goes without saying, I was deeply devastated, and I couldn't cope with the grief, and I left my job, and my presentation stopped, and I became socially isolated, and 2 years later I actually got hospitalized again. So I had to begin my recovery story all over. But it didn't take, with the things that I had learned in the past, it didn't take 10 years this time. And I recently, in the last couple of years, developed the Oops Loop with Paul Klein, which is my little invention for the phone. And I also began promoting my quirks, which are 14 animated characters, each one representing a mental health symptom that I'd experienced. And I'm back. I feel better, and I've learned that life has just a way of throwing things at us. And the more resilient we are to trauma, the better we'll be. Many things help us do but if I wonder if I'd had early intervention as a child, then maybe I never would have developed schizoaffective disorder. So that's why I tell my story, hoping that it'll help a parent and a child today. And the more support we give and get, the better we'll all be. And in society that's become so divisive, let's try to be there more for each other, family or not, because maybe by doing so, mental health issues will in time, in a more informed and supportive world, lessen. And I believe this to be true, and I hope you do too. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason. That was fabulous. Great to see you again.
It's good seeing you too, Jessica. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to hear from Garrett Smith. So take it away.
All right, thank you. And yes, that was very powerful, Jason. It's all nonlinear, right? Right. Recovery is nonlinear. So it's the ups and downs and the valley and the peaks, right? But I want to share a few things about my journey, but I want to focus it in on the beginning of my journey, because I've been dealing with this since 2010, where it's like on paper, but I would say it's been something that's been in my life for quite a while. When we think about the same things Jason was talking about with trauma, diverse childhood experiences, dealing with, just trying to survive from day to day, and being in a survival mode from day to day, that does a lot with your actual development as a human being, right? So we already know that, the brain development is up all the way up until the age of 26. So if you're going through all of these things, it can have a toll. And for myself, I was 20 years old when I was formally diagnosed or have an actual given diagnosis, which is bipolar type 1 disorder with psychotic features. I was going to Loyola University at the time in New Orleans, and nobody in my family and nobody in my friend circle or social circle knew anything about mental illness, anything about mental health. I myself didn't know jack squat about it. So all I knew was what almost any other person my age know, that's not directly impacted or have a directly impacted family member, is just One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Clockwork Orange, whatever CNN says, whatever Fox says. I don't really watch Fox like that, but whatever they say is what my interpretation of mental health was. So when I was diagnosed, it was off of a manic episode, and it was the first of 4 manic episodes I had from the time span of February 2010 to July of 2010. I was having a manic episode almost every month. That goes a lot to show about the service, mental health service in the system, the way that this stuff happens. But I was 20 years old and I was having a manic episode. Nobody knew what to do. So you know what they did? They called the cops. And cops came, and I was mental hygiene arrested, and I was brought into treatment. It's forced treatment. It was against my will, handcuffed to a bed, et cetera, et cetera. Ended up staying in an inpatient hospital for 8 days. They gave me some medication, sent me on my way, and it was like, all right, good luck. It's kind of like that type of situation. It's not a real service in place, or even a good way to help a person understand what it is they're dealing with. I feel like they barely understand it. So it's like for them to try to explain it to another person is very difficult for them to grasp that this is something that's a lifelong journey, so to speak. So I was just trying to figure things out, and this happened when I was in New Orleans. So then I moved up to Buffalo because my father lives in Buffalo, and I moved up to Buffalo to try to change it, because I'm thinking like, okay, maybe it's, trying to take my own accountability. It's like, I was being a knucklehead. I was doing a lot of partying, doing a lot of things I wasn't supposed to be doing while I was in school. So I was like, well, maybe it's, you know, it's something that I need to do. I was self-medicating. It was a lot of trauma that I was dealing with. My brother had passed away. There was a lot of stuff that I didn't know how to actually, you know, cope with. Wasn't taught those coping skills growing up. Didn't know much about coping skills growing up. Just knew the grit and make it, pretty much. Just grind it out. And I took all of that trauma with me. I took all of that stuff with me and just moved to Buffalo. It never like changed anything. I just changed location. So within weeks, I had another manic episode. And that manic episode resulted in police showing up once again, because I feel like, you know, from the doing the work that I do now, and everything that I do is driven by my experience and what I went through, and the people that I've seen on this journey and what they went through, and some of them that did not make it. So I try to do a lot of that. So what I look at when I talk to people and I interact with people about this is that when it's in a moment and you're dealing with like your child or your loved one, whoever it may be, that's going through a mental health crisis, it's not like, you know, okay, let me call 1-800 behavioral health provider so-and-so that's about to help me with this. Or, you know, like nobody really knows that. They know 911, right? So that's unfortunate. That's an unfortunate reality. And, you know, my father, he called 911. He didn't know what to do. He wanted to save his son. He didn't know what was going on. And it resulted in me being mental hygiene arrested, the same thing over and over. And during that time, I was in such a manic state and there was so much going on that I had an actual instant offense. I got into a fight. I was having delusions of reference, thought that the person that I was arguing with had demonic possession, right? It was straight full-blown manic episode with full-blown psychotic features going on. And I got into a fight with that person. That person subsequently passed away from the injuries. And I was sent to prison or sent to jail for that. And then from jail, I was sent to a forensic inpatient setting. And when I was in jail, that was the turning point in my life. That was the rock bottom for me in my life. My wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, but my wife now, she was pregnant. And I was sitting in solitary confinement for the first time ever in my life, first arrest where I'm in jail like this ever in my life. And I had to do something. And when I was sitting there, and you could hear people 3 o'clock in the morning, grown men, is all, you know, like ages 17 all the way up, that were crying, singing Amazing Grace, screaming out for their mother, you know, all of these different things. And that was a change where I was like, okay, if I can get a second chance and do something about this and try to make sure that nobody else is going through this or have to go through this, I'm gonna do something about it. And by the grace of God, I was given a second chance. And I used those opportunities to just really advocate as much as I can from every leg of the race. Like when I was in jail, I was going to solitary confinement for advocating. I was going, like, it was things happening for me that was very, very troubling for me. It was things that was very difficult for me to wrap my mind around, where it was like people that was 17, a 17-year-old young man that was in jail with me who completed suicide while in jail. Like that to me is things that I will always live with. I will always carry with me. And I look at people like that where it's like, you don't even need to be in this situation. You don't even need this type of support. Like jail is not a place for any human being to try to go through their recovery or to go through any type of treatment or care and support. So everything I do is around that. It's always surfacing around that, because when I was young and I was dealing with this, I didn't get no help. It had every single leg of the race. It's like nobody wanted to help me. And I finally got some support when I was actually in jail. So it's like they wait till you get all the way to the bottom, where you're now going to be in the system and stuck in the system to then give you support within with your mental health. You know, so it's like you got to change that. So that's where, you know, I'm glad you let me share this instead of just kind of talking about this. But that's the real issue that I see a lot, is that people get caught up in this system and they get stuck and they get trapped in it, and nobody wants to help them until they're all the way at the bottom, when now the state, the system, et cetera, whatever we want to call it, is able to, you know, use them as a commodity. So I'm here to try to help that. Thanks for letting me share. I'm gonna stop now. I think I went over my 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Garrett. Garrett has been instrumental in our group called the Mental Health Justice Project, and has traveled many times to meet with us and given us a lot of guidance, and certainly his personal story. You know, it's a tragic story, but it's happening again and again, and it's happening in Delaware County, it's happening in Otsego County, and all over the country. So really, what can we do? So thank you, Garrett. Appreciate that. So next is Ariana. Really great to have her here tonight, and I really enjoyed painting her. So thank you, Ariana.
Can people hear me?
Maybe a little louder, a little louder.
Yeah. Is that better?
That's better, great.
Okay. I have terrible social anxiety, so I'm just gonna read what I wrote out. Hi, my name is Ariana. I'm from Oneonta, and this is a little bit of my story. I wasn't diagnosed with bipolar disorder until I was 19. By then, living with untreated mental illness, I had already made a mess of my life. Drugs, cutting, toxic relationships and friendships. Only just in that year that I was 19, I destroyed my first serious adult relationship. I lost my apartment. I wrecked my car, was fired from the job that I loved, tried IV drug use. I went to 4 inpatient facilities, and the last hospitalization being the result of my first of a few future suicide attempts. I was on and off antidepressants as a young teenager, and on and on I kept having manic episodes. I had a great psychiatrist, but he didn't want to diagnose mood disorders like bipolar to people under 18. And I self-medicated. I couldn't deal with the mania, and I couldn't deal with the depression. It was an impossible situation. I'm going to, let's see, sorry. When I was 20 and my life had broken down and I attempted suicide, I ended up moving to Richmond, Virginia, hoping to have a fresh start on life. I felt whole and happy with new friends in an apartment with roommates. I actually went on a trip with some friends, and I left my medication in the hotel. I was on maybe 7 different medications, but they were helping. And my doctor said there was nothing that he could do. So I went off my medication cold turkey, and slowly my symptoms became too much for me to handle again. I fell back into old patterns, drinking, doing drugs, being promiscuous, shoplifting. Just, I would not be in my body when I became manic, and I couldn't function when I was depressed. I ended up in an extremely physically, emotionally, and sexually abusive relationship for nearly a year. I became isolated from my friends and family because of his violent behavior. I was young and I was high and lost, and I really hated myself at the time. I ended up living in a residential recovery facility. I had 4 more psychiatric hospitalizations, one of them being what they call down there temporary detention order, where you're forced to be in the psych hospital. It didn't change anything. Once I realized that I just had to say what they wanted to hear, I spent about 2.5 weeks there, but then I figured it out and they let me go, and I went right back to my life. But when I was arrested and incarcerated, I ended up in this residential facility. I had the first time, I only spent a few short amounts of time in jail. The longest time was 11 days. But in those times, one time I had a panic attack and they put me in medical isolation. Gave me a bunch of Xanax, so I was calm, and that was that stay. Nothing helpful. And another time, they took 3 days to give me my medication, and I was completely dissociated by then. Someone else that was there a long time, the tier leader, was able to talk to the guards and get me on my medication, but that was awful too. Then let's see. I'm gonna read a poem from one of my from when I was hospitalized down in Virginia. I'm tired of wearing long sleeve shirts and not knowing how to hold a conversation, because there's two of me, then there's none of me. So where does that leave me? I'd rather shoot up drugs than go to college, invent my own education. And my brother always said I had no soul. This place, all these institutions, all these people, doctors, and drugs are drowning me, drowning my soul. Someone said I'm the sanest one out there for shutting myself off to the world. That's how ugly it's become, and it hurts me. I don't know who I am, how I am, where I am. All I know is I'm gone. The world is ending. I have an addictive personality, and I can't stop. Thankfully, my family helped me out of the relationship. I moved back to Oneonta, and I started rebuilding my life. My life experiences, though, left me with severe PTSD, and triggers during therapy led me back to my old behaviors again. At the time, a man befriended me, telling me everything I wanted to hear. I was vulnerable and naive, and I had a habit of having to be in a relationship. The next 3 years were a blur. I married him within 6 months, and the cycle began again. Isolation, no friends, broken relationship with family, and evicted from numerous apartments. He lied continuously, and I felt like I was losing my mind. He became abusive, and I had promised myself I would never be in an abusive relationship again. I finally got clean and sober. For about a year I stayed, but then I spoke out about the abuse. And with the help of the violence intervention program in Oneonta, I moved into a women's safe house and eventually into my own apartment that I am still in today. I was heartbroken because the idea of the life I was trying to build was shattered. In my experience, losing what you think you have is just as heartbreaking as losing what you do have. Even though free from the chains of that lifestyle, I was drowning from the trauma and began self-medicating again. At that time, it was a doctor who was writing me prescriptions, and I was blacking out, slurring my words, and it was all prescribed to me. But I ended up going into a dual diagnosis program voluntarily. It was the first actual dual diagnosis, addiction and mental illness, but I had to go to Vermont to find that. There aren't things like that here in New York, but it was incredibly helpful. The Brattleboro Retreat Center in Brattleboro, Vermont. I spent 23 days inpatient and another month in the partial hospitalization program. Then when I came home, I started to do dialectical behavioral therapy. That was in Syracuse, New York. I traveled 5 hours round trip each week for a year and a half. But even though it was such a struggle, I actually had to start seeing a therapist that was out of pocket because the mental health program here in Oneonta and the group therapy in Syracuse was considered double dipping by going to two mental health places, even though it was individual and group therapy. But I did it. I made that commitment because DBT truly saved my life. It was beyond helpful. I learned skills in order to be okay, to have meaning in my life, and to change my maladaptive thought patterns and behavior. I learned to cope with and express my emotions in a healthy manner. I've now worked at RSS for 6 years, and right now I decided to return to college to be able to become a social worker. And I want to eventually work with survivors of abuse and domestic violence and help people in the way that my VIP counselor did with me. She gave me hope, and there is a way through this to make something beautiful out of your suffering, I believe, and I want to show other people that. It took me a long time to find the right combination of medicine to manage my mania and emotional dysregulation. I still struggle with depression and the long-term effects of PTSD, but right now I have not self-harmed for 8 years, and I haven't used street drugs for over 5 years. I have many resources outside of myself and multiple helpful rituals and inner resources, including affirmations, nature, mindfulness, drawing and painting, exercise, helping others, spending time with loved ones, cuddling, and sex, not promiscuous though, music, playing games, and maintaining my routine. In conclusion, a really short poem. I'm sorry that I'm talking for so long. If I lay in bed short of a winter's dust, you think I'd rather be anyone but us? If I have yet to be that who I wish to be, you think I can't feel whole as this current me? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ariana. I'm so glad to have you here. And yes, she's quite an artist, both visual artist and writer. And so it's wonderful to have her here. It's maybe one of your first times to do this, I'm not sure, but quite an interesting story. And thank you for sharing it. So Mina, where are we with this? I see you up there. So.
Oh, that was just wonderful. I don't know if we, is Bill still in the Zoom? Maybe he'd like to say something about NAMI, and it certainly has come up in the presentations.
Right.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I am honored and impressed to know some of these people and to have met some of the people that I had not yet known until this evening. The stories are powerful images of the struggle it takes. You know, if your body chemistry and your circumstances are the adversity that you have to struggle against, I am thrilled to hear the stories of the resilience that, you know, is necessary to manage through all this. Just a comment about myself. I'm a retired therapist who specialized in working with children and their families. I will say that I also have family members who have, extended family members who have had and currently have mental health issues with anxiety, depression, bipolarity. So I understand a lot of this from both perspectives. Comment about NAMI and other resources, I will just direct people to go to the Bushel website where we have posted some links to resources that may be very helpful to family members, friends of people with mental health issues. I encourage people to check those out. NAMI.org is the national organization that I am part of. And there are several people who are steering committee at the local level of Otsego and Delaware counties who are working to try to address issues of stigma, advocacy for access to resources, and to provide some information for the general public about what the issues are, and the fact that, as Jessica mentioned earlier, there are a lot of folks that have issues with mental health struggles that you just may not be aware, because we're all just ordinary folks. Some of the stories, Garrett's stories, Jared's story, everybody's story is probably not obvious to just everybody that's just walking down the street or working as colleagues or friends or family. But these are the inner stories of the struggles, and it's not uncommon. Access to resources, a major struggle. The eastern part of Delaware County used to rely on inpatient services, psychiatric and addiction services in Kingston. Westchester Medical Center has withdrawn their planned efforts to provide enhanced services in Kingston, and are requiring people to go the extra distance to Poughkeepsie, which is something that adds to the burden. Inpatient services are minimal in the area. Bassett has 10 inpatient beds. Scurry has nothing. Norwich and Shenango County has nothing. Herkimer has nothing. So you have to go a distance in rural America to get specialized services. That is an extra burden for people with mental health issues, as well as their friends and family. And the more you go at a distance, for instance, Poughkeepsie or Binghamton, they may or may not realize what the circumstances are in their home communities, access to services. Again, take a look at the Bushel website. Take a look at the resources that are listed. Explore the links that are there in the document that NAMI of Delaware and Otsego counties has posted there. And get in touch with us. If you're a friend or family member of somebody who is struggling with mental health issues, we can provide some support. Our resources are kind of spread thin, but nonetheless, we will make every effort to help people get connected with what's going to be helpful. We provide a support. At this point, it's conference call phoning, support for family-to-family program. We are hoping to develop further or redevelop the In Our Own Voice resource that folks like Jason, for instance, can go out and speak to the public audiences and about the challenges, and destigmatize the whole issue of providing support. We have just are completing a 8-session series for family and friends of folks who are needing some help in understanding the range of things that mental health challenges present, and how best you can cope with somebody that you're trying to be helpful with in your own household or friends. So we can get in touch with us. We'd be glad to help, and if we don't have an answer to something, we can track down some resources. So please, don't sit there. If whatever you're trying to do to cope isn't working, reach out, ask for some help with it. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of some strength in reaching out and knowing you need some help. That's okay. We all need some help. So I would encourage people to reach out to people that you can be helpful to, supportive of, and add yourself to the range of folks that are in a network of supports. People who understand what it's like to be there, to have been there, to be in recovery in some fashion, and because you're not alone at all. So
thanks
for joining in this program, and thank you, Jessica, for your work on this, your portraits, your connections with the folks that you have painted, and thanks to the folks that have spoken here. Jason, Garrett, and Ariana, I really appreciate your being able to, be part of this and make your personal stories part of this presentation. Thank you.
Yes.
So back
Thank
to
you so much.
Thank you, Bill.
I invite folks in the audience to, I think you can put your questions in the chat, or I think we're kind of small enough if you wanted to do a raise hand thing and just be in conversation. I think that would be fine too. I just wanted to say, just hearing your stories, it's so moving to think about. I mean, the thing that really struck me is your has been your commitment to recovery. Just the hurdles that you presented in your path to recovery is just so. I mean, there are just so many hurdles, and I feel that what Bill also said about being part of the network, helping others. In your work as peer specialists, I just would put it out there to the three of you if you wanted to speak a little bit about how, how if you had been a recipient of peer specialist assistance and how you approach your work as peer specialist. Garrett, I don't know if you want to start. Yep. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't mind jumping in. So before peer specialist, it was peer advocate, right? So I didn't really know what a peer specialist was until like 2014. So when I got into advocacy, it was in 2010, and I got into advocacy because there was a peer advocate. Her name is Susan Sotek. She's like one of my, I have a few like surrogate moms or like mama bears, because like people will realize like, wait, you're in New York State all by yourself, and wait, your family is overseas or your family is in this whole other part of the state. Let me help you, So it's like, she was the first person that told me about the peer movement, the peer community. She was telling me about advocacy, and she just pretty much took me under her wing and showed me like what this thing is about. And then, and that was when I was in a forensic setting. So I seen what she was doing. I seen how she helped people, and it's like how she was like unapologetic about her lived experience. Like that was powerful to me, where she didn't care who you were. Like she was not hiding who she was for anyone, and she wasn't like in your face about it or making you uncomfortable either. She was just being herself, and it would be times where I seen her interact with like, say we were at it was one point where I had to go on a transport for like, I had to get like my wisdom teeth taken out. So it's like, I was on a furlough. So, I was in confinement. So it was like a little hard for me to just get in the community. So we was on a transport, and she's talking to a dental hygienist, and they're just having a regular conversation. And the way she wove in mental health, like just threw that dental hygienist for a loop, because she wasn't even like thinking about it like that. But the way she put it in the frame made her more aware. And to me, like that's powerful. In the way that she would advocate and navigate through the system, I was just like, I need to study under this person. And that really gave me my start, really, like, to be honest, because I started to learn how to really like advocate to make real changes for people and for myself while I was going through confinement. And then when I was out in the community, it made it even easier, because now, I'm unchained, you know what I mean? So it was like, oh, you let out a monster. So, it was that. And just, again, with Jason, and I know Jason from my work when I was working with Office of Mental Health, and the work that he was doing in the Catskill region. But I just want to say this, is that with recovery, I don't look at it as like you got to start over or it's a stop and go and all these things. I'm fortunate enough to not have a relapse since 2010, July 2010, not have anything going on with me. I'm fortunate for that, but it takes a lot of work, and it's a lot of self-care that needs to happen, and a lot of daily maintenance that needs to happen to just sustain and make sure you're good. So I say all that to say that when you're a peer specialist and you're doing all of these things and you're involved and you care and you're really trying to help people get through this, that vicarious trauma can take over, vicarious trauma can get involved, and you could find yourself needing that support just as much. So, you know, it's a two-way street, but being a peer specialist is something that's very important, because it's a bridge. It's a bridge for people who have that lived experience that's not ready to share yet, and they need somebody to help them with it. And it's also a bridge for people who don't yet understand, but they can talk to a person that has that sense of clarity that can, you know, give them an alternative perspective. Thanks.
Thank you, Garrett. I mean, we've had conversations in our group about peers working in different environments, that say in the jail, you know, having peer liaisons, you know, because trust is really hard, I think, for people who are, you know, they may not, maybe their medications aren't right, they may not even be thinking quite clearly. So to have someone, as in so many things, who has been through some kind of journey that you are experiencing, the trust is just, you know, wonderful. And I think, I just think there are so many ways that peers could be put into different formats that are failing right now. It's just something that really we need to look at in Delaware County, and you know, and even with our police reform, it was mentioned, but I think it's something that we need to look at models that where it's working and try to follow some of those. And you might have something to say about that, Garrett, but so anyway, I don't
want to hog the show, but I could go, but I don't want to, you know, I'm trying to be, you know, kind of sharing is caring, you know what I mean?
Right. You could say a little there.
Okay.
You've been involved in Delaware County a lot, which we appreciate.
Yeah. So yeah, there are models that exist. We know this. We are aware of this. They were supposed to be, you know, the jail reform and the reinvention in jail reform plans. That was just all a dog and pony show. You know, I know we've been recorded, but hey, I don't care. I'm free now. So it was a dog and pony show. Like it didn't really result in much, you know, and I think those are the things that keeps people distracted. It's like the carrot, you know, hanging the carrot in front of the horse type of situation, you know, where it's just really to just lead you on down a dead end path. Because the real issue is that people who are actually overseeing these different systems where people get involved in this, they aren't connected like that. They only see things in theoretical terms. You never see the actual practice of these things. So like they're not on the ground to see that's happening, and they don't really want to deal with it. I know that for my own example is that I was not, like, people were not really trying to help me like that. They were just waiting for me to just fall to the bottom where they could put a charge to me and then send me on way to whether it's prison or whatever form of confinement. So there's models. There's models in New York State. There's models across the country. There's models in other parts of the world. In New York State, there's two models specifically that I always talk about with jail. There's the one in Jefferson County and the one in Lewis County, and they're both ran through NERCL, which is the Northern Regional Center for Independent Living, NERCL. And they're in Jefferson and Lewis County, and they have a jail diversion program that is peer run. It's a peer run jail diversion program where people can have that support with getting their Medicaid insurance reinstated if that's the support that they need. If they need support with navigating their treatment when they're going through court or any of that type of process with getting connected with the proper services that is what they need and what they want, you know, that's also available. So it's whatever that person needs, from AA to NA to just, you know, helping that person with child services, if that's the situation. It's looking at the full spectrum of what makes a person, because not nobody's just in a mental health bucket and that's it. You know, it's more to us as human beings than just a mental illness. So yeah, there are programs out there. You know, there's Broome County with what they do with their crisis diversion, where they even have a crisis respite that a person can go to versus going to the ER. We already know how that can be triggering and re-traumatizing. So all of these different things that are in place, but it has to be a will on both ends. It has to be a will from the people to actually really want it as a community, and it has to be a will from people that's in these appointed positions, in these appointed legislative positions, or in these elected positions, to actually really provide this for their community. If that happens, where it's both ends working together for the common good, then you see it happen. But until it gets to that point, it really will just be the same, you know, cycle of, you know, Dante's Inferno type situation. But it's possible. It's happening in New York State, in different parts of the state right now. Like I'm in Rochester, base building in Rochester, and we are talking about doing reentry in the Monroe County Jail, with having reentry peer support. In New York City, they had a peer workforce coalition that's working with the Justice Peer Initiative. That's the whole goal is to develop a forensic peer certification, so peer specialists or people that's providing peer services can go into the jails, can go into the prisons, go into the long stay institutions, and provide that peer support and help people integrate back into the community. So it's there. There's models all across this state. You don't even have to look to Chicago or to California or go over to Sweden. I've been seeing people like find plans in Sweden. I'm like, all right, you could get a plan in Sweden, but you got a plan right here in the neighboring county that you can use. You can actually talk to these people. You can actually go visit it. So it's just a matter of people really want to do it, you know, and I see across the state, there's some people that do, there's some people that kind of do, but they don't want to put the work in. There's some people that just don't care. They don't want to do it at all. So, you know, I would say for Delaware, you got to figure out what kind of people you are. what level are you really, are willing to do it at and go to length. You know, it takes a lot of teeth pulling because, you know, you're in a very red county.
Well, Garrett has been really, you know, trying to, I mean, coming many times in to meet with our group and just given a lot of energy to it, and we're appreciative, and we still have hope for Delaware County, and, you know, small steps hopefully will lead to a better outcome for people who are getting involved with the criminal justice system, which is usually tragic for people with mental illness.
If I could just share one last thing, and I'm going to silence myself. I'm going to mute my mic after this. I'm going to try to stay within 2 minutes. I myself believe in self-reliance, self-empowerment. I believe in sovereignty. And I feel like some of the best solutions is to give a person the tools for themselves to build it out themselves, right? That I believe in that. And I just want to mention that because I want to say this about this legislation that I'm in huge support of. Is one of the legislations that I've seen that helped motivate me to leave the state and not work under government to try to advocate for these system changes. So with Clean Slate, the reason why I'm mentioning this is because Clean Slate to me is a practical next step for anybody that's really pursuing their recovery and really trying to live a full life, or trying to live as whole of a life as they can. Because I know a lot of people who has years and years and years of recovery under their belt, where they don't have no more like type of criminal interactions, they don't have no more petty misdemeanor charges that they get from dealing with their recovery or trying to go through their traumas, all of these different things, where they're over 3 years for misdemeanors or 7 years for felony convictions. And a person that's pursuing their recovery, that's really in their recovery and doing what they need to do to be a member in their community, a pillar in their family, Clean Slate applies to them. Because what Clean Slate will do, it will automatically seal their conviction records. What that does is allow a person to then move where they want to move in the community, right? They can live where they want to live without worrying about getting screened for a conviction record. Because right now they there's 4 out of 5 landlords screen for conviction records. Then if you look at education, like how where'd she go? Ariana. Like Ariana mentioned, she want to go back to school to be a social worker. You know, if you have a conviction record, it makes it hard for you to go back to school. So, because 3 out of 5 colleges and universities screen for conviction records. So all of these things, and then think about just direct employment. 9 out of 10 employers screen for conviction records. So if you're pursuing your recovery, and we know this as nominee members, so some nominee members on here, so they know I'm not lying about this. Like, you're going through recovery, you're going to have some type of interaction with the criminal legal system. In today's society, the way today's society is framed, it happens a lot. Before you figure it out, you cross paths. So you have this conviction record, you're pursuing your recovery, you're in recovery, years and years under your belt, you know, on and off, you got years under your belt, and you're doing what you need to do. Yet you have this conviction record from when you were 17, or from when you were 20, or from when you were 25, you may be 45 years old now, and you still got to deal with something that when you were 23. So to me, clean slate is the practical version of like what recovery means at that next level, because that's covering access to education, access to employment, access to housing, all of these different things. And it's really giving you a real second chance at life. So I just want to mention that because it's really important when we think about the recovery community and really helping a person be self-reliant and empowered to live a sovereign life. You know, nothing more helpful to that person than allowing them to get a job, or allowing them to go to school, or allowing them to do, like, you helping them help themselves. So I hope that was short enough.
I really like that, Garrett, because it's, you know, even as a peer specialist in Schoharie County, we're going to be looking for other peer specialists, but they have to jump through the hoops. There's so many hoops, you know, just having a diagnosis and having a recovery story in itself, where in a mental health issue where you could be re-stimulated very easily and then re-triggered, and then on top of that, if you have there's a background check, like what you're talking about. This is just for the peer specialist position, and there's a background check with that alone, and so that lowers the opportunities for a lot of people to get involved. So I love what you're talking about. That's incredible. I'm going to advocate for that too. So thank you.
So just if I could just clarify one point. Clean slate is a very no nonsense bill, and is a very make sense bill. So with background checks for vulnerable populations, that will stay how it is. Clean slate is not contradicting that, because clean slate is looking at it as like, it's for people who really are earning that right to life, that earning that second chance to life, not a right to life. Sorry, you already earned the right to life by being born. You earned it by being born, right? So that second chance in the community, you really earned that. You really put the work in for that. So and it's safeguards, you know, it's safeguards around licensing. So even if you were like, say you got a DUI, right? Clean slate will be a safeguard for you in the sense of, like, say you wanted to go get a job, you know, being a plumber, or being any other job. But say you want to go get your CDL to be a truck driver, no, you can't do that, because it's a direct contradiction of, you know what I mean? So it's like those type of things. It's safeguards in place for that situation. Same thing as if you got fraud and now you're trying to be a accountant. No, you're not gonna do that. So it's the same type of situation. But with that being said, it does not contradict any current sealing practices that's in New York State, and it does not contradict anything that's permissible within New York State when it comes to background checks. What it does is seals most jobs most employers from being able to see your conviction records. It seals all landlords or mortgage companies to be able to see into your conviction records, as well as colleges and universities. So it seals that from most civic proceedings. The only people that have access to your records, who have to go through a process where it's not like you just have carte blanche access, is courts, prosecutors, law enforcement for like if you want to, you know, if you want to get a gun, so to speak, if you want to own a weapon, you know, like those type of situations, as well as state agencies who license for for programs or services that oversee vulnerable populations, because you know we need to have safeguards. You know, it's not saying every single human being out there is some upstanding person. We know there's some people out here that aren't, you know, as positive. So yeah.
Okay.
I just didn't want to make you think that the background check thing was
Yeah.
like,
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Garrett. So Ariana, do you have anything you'd like to say, or we close out? I don't know if we can. Oh.
Okay. I guess I didn't hear about peer specialists until maybe 3 years ago, and I met with Kate Hewitt, and she is incredible. Like, ever since I heard her story, maybe 10 years ago, I have wanted to be like that. And right now, I was looking into peer specialist training, and I decided instead to go to school because I have this specific passion to help people that have gone through trauma, because that was the hardest thing I've ever gone through, and I've gone through a lot, and I know how dark it can seem, and I feel like I can be like, hi, I was there, I get how it feels, and I know it's hard, but look, there's another side to it. You can get through to the other side. So but with peer specialists, I get that whole idea, because I've been going to 12-step meetings. I mean, I don't go recently because that's not available in the town, but the power of someone helping another person who's been there, and I don't think that it necessarily has to be that way. I've had maybe 2 therapists since I was 12 that were incredible and hadn't been through it. That's just out of my therapist's, like, it's not necessary, but when someone has been there is this kind of connection and trust and non-judgment. You know that you're not being judged, and you don't have to be insecure, and that's where you can truly be vulnerable. And it's I hope that the peer specialist movement, I guess, keeps expanding, even if I don't choose to do it. I also what was I gonna say? Sorry. Never mind. I forget. But Garrett and Jason, what you guys do is incredible. I read your little stories, and Jessica, you are awesome. I'm glad I got to meet you. I just I guess one more thing, what I remember now is I'm noticing with what I read and see that the stigma of mental illness, which is so hard, but it's getting chipped away at a little bit because of COVID, actually. I think that maybe something good came of it, because more people have been experiencing the symptoms of mental illness. And I know that's not a good thing, but the fact that it's normalizing those symptoms, and it's normalizing going and getting help, going to therapy, taking medication, and people are talking about it. People that don't struggle like us with this severe lifelong thing, but they have seen it with all the isolation in the last year or two. And I think that's again, something beautiful that's coming from an awful tragedy in the world. I really can see that it can change the stigma, because it's enough struggle already without having the labels. Anyways, thank you, everyone.
That's a great thought.
That's a really interesting point. Yes.
Yeah. Mina, is there anything from chat, or where are we?
Yeah, I think everyone has been, just really appreciative of hearing the stories and your remarks, and how, what can we do to continue this discussion, and how do we push forward on some of these on strengthening the resources here in Delaware County and in counties throughout New York State. But particularly we are, Jessica, you and I are concerned about how we can really strengthen our resources here in Delaware County, because it seems to be, I think Garrett has expressed that it's we're really lacking in that area.
Definitely.
Well, they have the Build Back Better investment that's coming through to the different counties. So I don't know how much Delaware got, but I'm pretty sure that's resources that's going towards a lot of this. One of the things was it's called like CVI, like crisis violence something. So, they come up with titles for stuff just to but it's coming through, and it's supposed to be allocated to different counties. So it's just thinking, because they're gonna say like, hey, what's the funding behind this, or we don't have any funding for this, or we gotta find funding. And I think that's one of the opportunities.
No, and I think there's also with ARPA, with the American what is it, the ARPA funds, the COVID recovery funds. There are budget meetings happening in every township. How do they spend those funds? And I think that's a place where advocates and family members and those can bring these concerns to public officials. Here's where you can spend your money.
Exactly.
Exactly. Let me say, this is Bill. So if anybody wants to get in touch with the NAMI steering committee in our area, you're welcome to call me, and I'll, my number is out there, but I'll give it to you right now. It's 607-267-2335. You can email us at NAMI Delaware CO, Delaware County, NAMI Delaware CO at gmail.com. So we'd be glad to hear from you. We'd be glad to help support you. We would be glad to speak to groups that you may be part of, whether it's Rotary or Unitarian Church or whatever group it is. And if we are not the folks to do that, we know we can get in touch with folks. So spreading the word about the issues, about the supports that are available. This is really important stuff. Again, we're just folks. You're all just folks. We all have our own private stories that people may just not be aware of. And unfortunately, by default, a lot of things happen to end up because of behavior, and the behavior attracts the attention of the criminal justice system, and then that becomes another whole issue. So please take a look at the Bushel website. Again, there's contact links for a bunch of things there, and certainly you're welcome to call and talk about what the issues are, what kind of help and support you might need, what brainstorms and ideas. And I appreciate Ariana going into social work, and the lived experience is a powerful tool that can be helpful to many more people than you imagine. You just don't know what impact you may have. So thanks everybody for being part of this, and get in touch with the resources that you need to have some connection with, because again, you're not alone. There's other of us out there who we'd be glad to help, support, and encourage and advocate for excellence. Thanks.
Well, I think we should wrap this up. I want to thank everyone who's attended the event here tonight. Jessica, thank you so much again for your beautiful work and your show. Please, if you're in the Delaware County area, come visit this Saturday and Sunday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. We'll have open hours and you can spend more time with the work instead of looking at it through my janky laptop during the presentation. And if you can't make it those days and you still want to come see the work, you can email me at info@bushelcollective.org, and I'm happy to open the doors and have you take a peek at the show. Jason, Peyton, thank you so much for being here tonight and sharing your story. Garrett Smith, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. Ariana Illowit, thank you very, very much for being with us tonight and sharing your story. Bill, thank you so much for your work and for your presence here tonight. So thank you, everybody. And let's find ways to continue this dialogue. We here at Bushel, we're open for using it as a gathering place. If you want to have in-person discussions, we'll wear masks. And if there's a film screening, some kind of an event that you think would help spread the word and continue this conversation, please let me know, because this is the kind of thing that we do here at Bushel. So thanks everybody, and good night.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Good night. Good night, everybody.